Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, condensed and retold for people who don't have the patience to read. In the world state, everyone is conditioned to be happy. From the very beginning, society is shaped in a way that guarantees stability and contentment, even if it means sacrificing freedom, individuality, and deeper emotions. In this dystopian future, humans are grown in hatcheries, not born naturally, and programmed to fit into one of 5 castes: alphas, the leaders, and the betas, gammas, deltas, and epsilons, who are assigned their places in society based on intelligence and physical abilities. Each person is happy with their predetermined role because they've been conditioned to love what they do. No one questions their place in the world. At the Central London Hatchery and Conditioning Centre, the director of hatcheries explains to a group of students the intricacies of the state-controlled reproduction system. This sterile, emotionless world has no room for natural birth or the messiness of family relationships. People are created and controlled from the start, ensuring complete loyalty to the world state and its motto: community, identity, stability. As the director boasts of the achievements in conditioning, the students listen in awe, blind to the oppressive nature of the society they live in. Bernard Marx, an Alpha Plus, works at the hatchery as a psychologist, but unlike other alphas, Bernard feels out of place. Despite his intelligence, he is physically smaller than the average alpha, and this makes him insecure. He harbors secret doubts about the world state and finds its superficiality disturbing. He cannot reconcile the constant, shallow pursuit of pleasure with his own desire for deeper meaning. Most of his peers indulge in casual sex, soma, a drug that keeps citizens happy and docile, and feelies, movies with tactile sensations. Bernard, however, longs for a real connection, something genuine that goes beyond the mindless pleasures of the society. Lenina Crown, a beta who works as a vaccination technician at the hatchery, is the epitome of what the world state considers normal. She's cheerful, attractive, and completely satisfied with the way things are. Lenina doesn't understand Bernard's reluctance to conform or his distaste for the society's emphasis on instant gratification. Still, she is drawn to him and agrees to accompany him on a trip to the Savage Reservation, a place where people live outside the control of the world state, adhering to natural life, aging, religion, and family bonds. The Savage Reservation is a harsh contrast to the clean, controlled world Bernard and Lenina are used to. Here, they see the realities of natural life, sickness, aging, and death. The people of the reservation live according to their traditions, and to Bernard and Lenina, their rituals seem primitive and strange. They witness a ritualistic dance where a young man is whipped as part of a religious ceremony, something unthinkable in the world state, where pain and suffering have been eradicated. While on the reservation, they meet John, a young man who is the son of Linda, a woman originally from the world state who was stranded on the reservation years ago. Linda had a relationship with the director of hatcheries but became pregnant, an unspeakable scandal in the world state, and was left behind on the reservation. John was born naturally, a fact that causes him great shame among the people of the reservation, who view him as an outsider. He has grown up feeling isolated and torn between 2 worlds, the native culture of the reservation and the fragments of world state ideals passed down from his mother. Linda, having lived without access to soma and other comforts of the world state, has become an outcast on the reservation. She longs to return to her old life despite the fact that her appearance, aged, worn, and unhealthy, would shock the citizens of the world state who never see the effects of aging. John, however, has no such desire. He finds his identity in the works of William Shakespeare, which he discovered in an old book. Through Shakespeare's plays, John has formed his ideas about love, honor, and suffering, all of which stand in stark contrast to the shallow, pleasure-driven ideals of the world state. Bernard, sensing an opportunity to elevate his status back in London, decides to bring John and Linda back with him. His primary motivation is to embarrass the director, who he believes is John's father, but he is also fascinated by John's unique perspective. When they return to London, John, dubbed the Savage, becomes an instant celebrity. Everyone in the world state is curious about this man who grew up outside their rigid, controlled system. John, however, is horrified by what he sees in London. The world state is even more superficial and empty than he imagined. The people are shallow, detached from any real emotions, and completely dependent on soma to avoid any discomfort or negative feelings. John becomes increasingly disillusioned with the world state, particularly in his interactions with Lenina, who represents everything he finds repellent about the society. Lenina, confused by John's rejection of casual sex and his insistence on something deeper, tries to seduce him, but John violently pushes her away. His feelings for Lenina are complicated by his idealized notions of love, shaped by Shakespeare's works, and his repulsion toward the casual, meaningless relationships of the world state. Meanwhile, Linda, now back in London, quickly succumbs to her addiction to soma. She spends her days in a drug-induced haze, retreating further and further from reality until she ultimately dies from an overdose. John is devastated by his mother's death, but even more so by the cold, emotionless response of the people around him. To them, death is nothing more than an inconvenience, something that should be swept aside quickly to maintain the stability of society. As John's internal conflict deepens, Bernard's social standing begins to unravel. His newfound popularity, which had risen thanks to his association with John, collapses as John refuses to conform to the role of the obedient savage. Bernard, once an outsider himself, becomes resentful of John's refusal to play along, as it jeopardizes the status he has gained. Bernard's friend Helmholtz Watson, another alpha, sympathizes with John's dissatisfaction. Helmholtz is a talented writer but feels stifled by the restrictions placed on his creativity. He and John bond over their mutual frustration with the emptiness of the world state, though Helmholtz's desire for freedom manifests differently. While John clings to the old values of suffering and sacrifice, Helmholtz longs for creative expression and intellectual freedom. The tension reaches a climax when John, horrified by the society's dependency on soma, tries to incite a rebellion. During a soma distribution ceremony, John attempts to convince a group of workers to throw away their soma and break free from the artificial happiness that controls their lives. His outburst leads to a chaotic scene, and John, along with Bernard and Helmholtz, is arrested. The three are brought before Mustafa Mond, one of the world controllers. Mond explains to them the philosophy behind the world state. He acknowledges that the society has sacrificed art, science, and religion for the sake of stability and happiness. In Mond's view, individual freedom and deep emotions are dangerous because they lead to instability and conflict. The world state is built on the principle that by eliminating choice, pain, and discomfort, people can live in a state of perpetual contentment. John, however, rejects this view. He argues that true happiness cannot exist without suffering, that love and joy are meaningless if they are not earned through struggle and sacrifice. He longs for a world where people can experience the full range of human emotions, even if it means enduring pain and hardship. Mond listens to John's arguments but ultimately dismisses them as outdated, relics of a bygone era that has no place in the carefully controlled world they have created. As punishment for their dissent, Bernard and Helmholtz are exiled to remote islands, where they will live among others who do not fit into the world state. Bernard, devastated by his fall from grace, begs for mercy, but Helmholtz accepts his fate with a sense of excitement, eager for the chance to explore his creativity in a place where he can think and write freely. John, however, refuses to accept any place in the world state. He retreats to an abandoned lighthouse on the outskirts of London, where he attempts to live a life of simplicity and self-discipline. He punishes himself for his perceived sins and tries to cleanse himself of the corrupting influence of the world state. Despite his efforts to escape, John cannot shake the attention of the public. Crowds of people flock to the lighthouse to watch the savage perform his rituals, turning his life of isolation into yet another spectacle for the society to consume. Unable to escape the relentless intrusion of the world state and overwhelmed by guilt and despair, John takes his own life. His tragic death stands as a final act of defiance against the shallow, pleasure-driven world he sought to reject. Yet the society he left behind continues on, unchanged and unaffected by the loss of one man who dared to seek something more. If you enjoyed this, Hit the subscribe button to be a part of Quick Reads for people with no patience, and see the description below to find out how you can get the original classic. Who knows, we might have piqued your interest.